all around the world. Roads, bridges, railways, waterways, tunnels, and airports. In one way or another, extreme. From the crazy to the deadly, the magnificent to the terrifying. Incredible engineering and astonishing human stories. These are the world's most extreme. Airports. Connecting the world from the Caribbean to Alaska, and Nepal to the South Pole.
In so many parts of the world, the aircraft is the only way to get in and out.
Airports bring continents and people together. Their extreme engineering. An ice airport rebuilt every year. A runway squeezed between skyscrapers. A landing strip carved into mountains.
The main hazard, it's the airport itself.
Usually the reason for an extreme airport is there was no other place to put it.
They can be launch pads for air races, tourist attractions for thrill seekers, amazing locations, and extraordinary lives. Now keep your seatbelts fastened for the 10 most extreme airports on the planet. At 10, we're in the Caribbean, for the airport where you're closest to the jets. The Princess Juliana Airport on the island of St. Martin. The planes fly in just 40 feet overhead. You can't get closer than this. Landing is extreme enough. Here on St. Martin's Maho Beach, sunbathing is a spectator sport.
When the big planes come in and they land directly over the heads of the people on the beach, it's staggering. It's like standing right at the end of the runway at JFK, but you're in your bathing suit.
On St. Martin, there's so little flat land that none of it can be wasted on a wide airport perimeter. And this lack of space is a problem across the Caribbean. Tiny Saba Airport has the shortest commercial landing strip in the world. St. Bart's forces planes to skim over a street before setting down. Or not.
Dude, that guy's got to stop. Whoa!
But Princess Juliana reigns supreme. It's a full international airport running straight off the beach.
You've got this beautiful azure sea, you've got this wonderful island, all the lushness, and you've got to concentrate on putting her down on this postage stamp of a runway, or at least that's what it looks like when you're making your initial approach.
The landings are shockingly close, just 40 feet up. But takeoff is where things get serious. The jet engines power up just 200 feet from the fence. A wave of 38-degree air and exhaust gas hits the beach at 50 miles per hour. The speed of a tropical storm. Unsuspecting holidaymakers are blown away by the power.
You're talking about a 747 where every engine is producing 50,000 pounds of thrust.
But some holidaymakers actually embrace the engines.
We're gonna get our asses kicked here!
Princess Juliana Airport has created a unique, dangerous, extreme sport.
Here we go!
Fence surfing. Some hang 5, others wipe out. But no one forgets the Princess Juliana Airport, whether you were in the plane or 40 feet beneath it. At 9 is the remotest airport at the bottom of the world. Introducing the McMurdo Sea Ice Runway, the airport for the South Pole.
It's so cold, it's so remote, it's almost like being on another planet.
This runway is built from scratch every year.
It's a hard, just cruel environment.
77 degrees south, just 800 miles from the pole. If your destination is the South Pole, this is probably your airport.
When the door opens up, you walk outside and you see, this is not New York, this is not LA, this is, Antarctica. There's these giant volcanoes and mountains around, ice everywhere. It's a pretty crazy experience.
John Cassano is an atmospheric scientist whose work depends on studying the poles. He needs to journey to Antarctica to survey its weather and climate. He has been coming here for 20 years.
The runway is completely essential to what we do.
He is one of 1,200 people who live and work at McMurdo Scientific Station at any one time.
This is the main Antarctic base for the United States. This is a high-value, critical research institution in the most inhospitable continent on the world.
For half the year, food and equipment are brought in by boat. Until the seasons change. The sea begins to freeze over. By early spring, the base is then 65 miles from open water. The only way in or out is by air. So, a runway is built. For 30 years, that has been David Bresnahan's job, to keep the airport open.
Well, the unique thing about the runway is it's built on about 8 feet of natural sea ice.
Every year, David and his team transform a rough field of the newly frozen sea ice. They need to create a 10,000-foot strip strong enough to withstand the immense weight of a fully loaded plane. They've got to get it right. Because the planes out here are really heavy. That ice has to hold a fully loaded carrier weighing 200 tons.
I'm sitting on the plane and thinking about it. I go, who would land a plane on sea ice? It's crazy.
2,600 feet of water lie beneath. Crack the ice, and you could be dead in seconds. Landing may be dangerous, but even reaching the sea ice runway is in doubt. Scientists at the South Pole rely on the planes to bring them their supplies. But this is Antarctica. The weather can change in an instant. And if a blizzard hits, it's a whiteout.
You can't see where the horizon is, and you can't tell what's up or down because you don't know where you are. You just feel like you're floating in space.
When the weather gets this severe, it is too dangerous for planes to even attempt to land. Instead, they must fly 2,000 miles back to where they came from.
That's called the boomerang. The next closest runway to McMurdo is where you took off from, in New Zealand.
The Sea Ice Runway. For the 5 months before it melts, it's the world's most remote airport. Next up, carved into the mountains of Nepal, there's a rugged runway that is a threat to every landing. We've seen the South Pole runway that must be built every year. From ice to to the gravel runway of Nepal for the world's roughest landing. Believe it or not, this is a commercial airport. Talcha in Mugu, Nepal. Totally isolated. It's a sheer-sided ledge carved into the mountainside. A gravel runway and a wooden control tower. But this is call sign TAL, Talcha Airport.
You put an airfield out in the wilderness, gravel runway, rough terrain, it's a completely different ballgame.
Mountainous terrain, high altitude, and rapidly changing weather make Nepal one of the most hazardous countries to fly in. Talcha, 230 miles from the capital, Kathmandu, is the site of one of the country's extreme airports. The village sits at 8,900 feet in the wild west of Nepal. It's a 70-mile journey by rutted road to the nearest town. That's a 5-day trek. So when the airport was built in 2003, it was a godsend. But the pilots who fly here are under no illusions about its condition.
Once I started coming in here, I was kind of scared myself. Inexperienced pilots are not allowed to come to this airport.
"8 a.m. Beam Dutta Punta is the air traffic controller at Talcha.
Good morning, sir. Runway.
He's been working here since the airport opened. No plane can land here without him. But today, the need is more pressing than ever. A local man has been brought to the airport on a stretcher. He's badly injured and needs medical help. It's taken 2 hours to carry him to the airport. The only hope is to fly him out. Air traffic controller Beam makes an urgent call to the airlines. The next plane takes off 100 miles away. At Talcha, the family waits nervously. It's been 2 hours. The plane comes into view. Now it must approach what's barely a scar on the landscape. The only guide for the pilot is 4 red flags and this simple white arrow. Now the pilot must get his plane down on the short gravel runway. And gravel is a tough surface to land on.
यो तलतिरको गाउँको बाटो पनि अब हामीले क्लोज गर्न सकेनौं खाल्टाखुल्टी पनि भइरहेको हुन्छ किसिमको एउटा एयरपोर्ट भएको हुनाले अप्ठ्यारै छ
The main hazard while landing at Talcha Airport, it's the airport itself. It is very, very challenging.
3 years ago, this plane landed and got it wrong. It dug into the gravel. The landing gear was smashed to pieces. Wreckage that lines the runway is a reminder of what can go wrong. If this plane doesn't land safely, the injured man will be stranded. As the plane touches down, the pilot must bring it to a halt, despite the rough surface.
There's a big cliff over there on the other side of the runway. So if the aircraft is not being able to stop, it'll go over the cliff. That's a disaster.
Made it. And the plane is still in one piece. but they must move quickly. The injured man is loaded aboard the plane, and within 20 minutes, it's back in the air. He's on his way to hospital. The air evacuation has worked. It's all down to this rocky strip of land, stuck on the side of a mountain. Talcha Airport. Number 7, the wet and wild Lake Hood, Alaska. A lifeline for the last frontier state.
Alaska was in many respects built on aviation.
An airport where nature rules.
You really have no way of knowing what the surface conditions are going to be.
This is Lake Hood, an airport so extreme, its runway is made of water. Lake Hood sits next to Anchorage International Airport. It houses 500 seaplanes, their owners paying $105 a month for parking. 30,000 flights land here every year. 90 takeoffs every day. It's the world's busiest seaplane base.
Essentially, when you're landing on water, you are not landing in controlled conditions. You are landing in a wild place.
If there's no runway, water can be your landing strip. But sometimes, splashdown doesn't go to plan.
I would not even be able to count the number of accidents and incidents on Lake Hood over time because this is Alaska bush flying.
Lake Hood in the summer of 2009. A de Havilland beaver carrying a family of 4 and 2 dogs takes off. Moments later, fortunately, no one is injured. The official investigation blames pilot error. Despite the danger, Lake Hood must stay open. It's the only route to the city of Anchorage for families living out in the wilds of Alaska. They have no road, no runway. They have to take off and land on rivers and lakes.
80% of the communities in Alaska have no road access. So in other words, they are linked to the outside world by air.
But in winter, there's not even open water. As temperatures plummet, Lake Hood freezes over. The airport is at a standstill. All air traffic is grounded. The lifeline to the interior, severed.
There's a lot of Alaskans that live off the grid, people that heavily rely on Lake Hood and its operators to maintain their way of life.
As the lake transforms, so too do the aircraft. Now the aeroplanes don't need to swim. They have to ski. Until the ice is set, they can't reopen the airport. Pilot Michael Laughlin must test the ice. Owner of a local airline, Regal Air, he wants to get his planes in the sky. But it must be safe.
Every now and then somebody gets a little overzealous and tries to get out on the ice before it's ready. Most of the time they fall through the ice. It's a major deal.
The first step is to drill the ice to monitor its thickness. Checking the ice is one thing, landing a plane on it is another. Coming down in a heavy plane could break the ice, putting a plane in danger.
Ice in particular has a lot more issues than landing on the water. You really have no way of knowing what the surface conditions are going to be, so it takes a lot of guesswork on the pilot.
No landing markings are set on the frozen lake. It's all down to a pilot's skill and judgment.
You're being really careful to look ahead, make sure there's no shallow ice or water coming through.
Unlike Antarctica, the ice here is never 8 feet thick.
If the ice is too thin, you'd fall through the ice.
Landings on the ice keep Lake Hood open. The airport stays operating through the winter freeze. And remote communities keep their air lifeline open. At 6, the world's fastest airport in Abu Dhabi. For 363 days of the year, it's a cargo port. But for one weekend, this happens. The Red Bull Air Race comes to town.
It's an amazing buzz. It's an incredible challenge.
This is the fastest motorsport on Earth. Planes reach speeds of 230 miles an hour as they slalom through 5 inflatable gates. Fastest time wins.
It's a roller coaster on steroids.
Abu Dhabi hosts the opening round of the season. From here, Mina Sayed Port. But for most of the year, this is a shipping port, hauling 900,000 tons of cargo each year. Then, over 48 hours, it turns into a championship airport.
With a whole ton of people and a lot of hard work, magically appears a race airport.
12 pilots from 10 countries and 50 support crew work out of the high-tech pit lane, tuning 340 horsepower engines and mentally preparing for their race. American Michael Goulian has been flying the races for 6 years.
The race airport here for the Red Bull Air Race is different than other airports because we create a coliseum for aviation in a week.
Getting the specialized aerobatic planes airborne isn't easy. This is a dockside, not a runway.
It's a very short space, and there's a fence at one end and the ocean at the other.
But these pocket rockets can lift off in just 240 meters.
We don't want to be at the airport, we want to be in the air flying.
So they can do this. The planes can barrel roll at up to 70 revolutions per minute. Completing the 5-kilometer course in under 100 seconds pushes pilots to the edge of human capability. They endure up to 12 Gs. A force so great, it would make most people pass out.
In this race, we bump the edge in our human ability to withstand the G, and then also what we can get out of our airplane.
This airport takes no prisoners and no passengers. There's not a Boeing or Airbus in sight, and that's because they build the whole thing from scratch. Just to race. Coming up is an island airport that vanishes with every tide. From a race runway for the world's fastest motorsport. At 5, on the Atlantic island of Madeira, it's our gustiest airport. Around the world, there are some wildly windy airports.
One of the toughest things for any pilot is a crosswind landing.
Winds can literally blow planes off the runway.
was a horrible, gut-wrenching feeling.
Pilots must fight the elements to set the plane down safely.
Runways appear to be fairly predictable, but the fact is the wind determines an awful lot.
Sometimes the wind proves too much. But no sunshine destination is quite like here. Funchal Airport. Sat on the edge of the island of Madeira, 350 miles off the coast of Africa, vicious sea winds whip across the runway at speeds of 40 miles per hour. Strong enough to flip an 18-wheeler truck. Gusts can take the speeds even higher. With winds like this, every landing is in doubt. Funchal is at the edge of the operating envelope for airports. Once gusts reach over 30 knots, all flights are grounded, and up to 10 flights a month can't land here.
People who make fatal mistakes on landings usually approach with the intent and purpose in your mind that you're going to get that airplane on the ground regardless.
Pilots must decide, force the landing and risk the lives of their passengers, or pull up and go around.
You can take an airplane almost down to touchdown and still go around successfully, as long as you've got flying speed.
For passengers, it's a sudden, scary lurch away from the routines of landing.
Here you're coming in, everything seems to be going normally, and all of a sudden you feel those throttles get kicked on, you're pushed back in your seat. You know something didn't go right.
At Madeira, it happens time after time after time.
It's a terrifying feeling.
Funchal. Hundreds of flights land there every year. Each is a testament to its pilot's skill. Swooping in at 4 is Hong Kong, long home to the world's craziest airports. It's the 4th most crowded territory in the world. For decades, Hong Kong's airports have had to fight with skyscrapers for every square inch of runway. And the most infamous was the legendary Kai Tak. A landing so scary, passengers called it the Kai Tak heart attack.
That was an airport that would scare you to death.
This was the most extreme airport to fly into.
In 1996, Kai Tak was the 3rd busiest airport in the world and one of the most dangerous. It served 440 planes a day. Over 30 million passengers pass through the airport every year. As a commercial pilot for Cathay Pacific, the country's home airline, Captain Mike Lowes flew into Kai Tak 15 times a month.
This was the most challenging approach in the world.
Surrounding mountains meant there was no direct flight path to the runway. Instead, Kai Tak forced the aircraft to make a 47-degree turn, surrounded by the city's skyscrapers.
For an airline pilot, it was an approach that was unique.
Passengers feared it as the Kai Tak heart attack. Pilots dreaded it as the Hong Kong turn. On approach, Mike's first aim was to line up with an orange checkerboard target on the mountainside.
We would then have to see the checkerboard, commit to landing, and then start the turn onto the runway.
This maneuver was so challenging, it was beyond the capabilities of flight computers. Instead, pilots had to fly the entire approach on manual.
That's when the skills came in, because you turned all the guidance system off.
Caution, caution, manual.
And as you turn the corner, you had to keep that runway in sight.
The turn had to be completed in just 20 seconds.
On completion of the turn, you'd be somewhere just between the gap in those two buildings when you were finally lined up with the runways. And you were probably only about 200 feet above the ground. So to make a landing onto runway 13 in Kai Tak,
100.
You had to be on top of your game.
40. 30.
Plus 15.
20. Retard.
Only the most experienced pilots were allowed to land at the deadly Kai Tak Airport.
You couldn't just come in here willy-nilly. You had to have done it in the simulator. You had to be checked out before you're allowed to even make the approach. And when you came here, it was a sense of achievement once you've done it the first time.
But as Hong Kong grew, Kai Tak proved too much of a challenge. It had to close, and Hong Kong needed a vast, new airport.
It was never, ever an option for a long-term viability of Hong Kong. There just was not enough space.
Complete lack of space was an extreme problem. Building a whole new island was the extreme solution. 2 small islands were flattened. 12 billion cubic feet of material had to be moved. 3,000 acres of new land were created. A new airport was born. This is Chep Lap Kok, one of the world's busiest airports. The closed Kai Tak Airport may have been dangerous, but Captain Mike Lowes remembers it fondly.
Great airport, a wonderful airport, challenging airport. It was the pilot's airport.
At 3, we head to the stormy North Atlantic and the world's wildest runway, Barra Airport. Sat on a tiny Hebridean island 60 miles off the Scottish coast. An airport that disappears with every tide.
This is one of the last remnants of that time when planes landed wherever they had a flat surface.
This landing strip is at the mercy of the elements.
We depend on Mother Nature to open the runways for us.
In Hong Kong, they built a runway on a man-made island. But at Barra, nature provides the runway. Twice a day.
Any landing you walk away from is a good landing.
9 a.m. The tiny island of Barra is cut off from the outside world and has been for the last 24 hours. Rough seas have stopped the ferry from the mainland. The airport is the only link remaining. Joe Gillies has lived in the area his whole life. It's his job to keep the airport running, come hell or high water. His first task is to turn a wide, flat strip of crushed shell and sand into a runway.
We've got the beach to inspect. All this has to be done before the plane arrives.
As soon as the tide is out, Joe is on the beach.
We'll have seen debris like wood, you get seaweed, ropes from fishing boats, all kinds of things like the odd carcass of a seal.
Clearing the debris is vitally important.
It could easily puncture one of the wheels and cause an accident.
9:30 a.m. With the runway clear, Joe prepares for the first scheduled flight of the day. The only scheduled flight of the day.
Just now we're only getting 1 aircraft a day.
Joe's next job is to monitor the weather. If the wind gets above 55 knots, the airport must shut.
Our wind is gusting 40 knots just now, but the weather's actually going to get worse.
For now, the airport can stay open. But the weather window is worryingly tight.
The visibility is quite poor. When it comes below this hill, It's not good for the aircraft.
Only specialist aircraft can handle Barra. One is the Twin Otter. Flying since the mid-1960s, its fixed undercarriage is perfect for landing on the soft sand surface of the beach. Only a propeller aeroplane can operate out of sandy Barra.
You wouldn't take a jet in there. Essentially, they're too heavy. You'd take it in once, and that's it. You wouldn't get it out again.
The daily flight to Barra took off from Glasgow an hour ago, and it must land before the weather worsens. With no time to lose, Joe takes up yet another new role, fireman. He and his colleagues will be ready at a moment's notice, should there be an emergency.
We've got 2 fire engines there ready to respond to an incident straight away. You have to be fast, because with the fuels they use, they burn fast.
10 a.m. Joe's in place, the beach is ready, and the flight makes its final approach. In the face of the elements, it's a great landing. But that is only half the job. The tide is turning and will soon flood the runway. Joe has to race to get the plane turned around and the passengers aboard.
The tide sometimes does its own thing. On certain days, the tide comes in a lot faster than other days.
Joe now swings into his 4th role as baggage handler.
20 minutes is the time limit for the aircraft. We have to do it faster, of course, if the tide's coming in.
All aboard, clear for takeoff. And then the Twin Otter is back in the air. Joe can relax. A hard day's work, well done. Barra is back in touch with the outside world. And thanks to Joe, the world's wildest airport remains open.
I love my job, just keeps us busy.
Coming up is this sky-high Himalayan airport. And at number 1, the airport under constant attack. Previously, we saw a beach airport on the wild coast of a Scottish isle. Now we travel back to the heart of the Himalayas for the world's most mountainous airport. Lukla. The gateway to the highest mountain on Earth, Everest, another of Nepal's extreme landings. A runway, 9,000 feet in the sky. It's short, steep, and potentially deadly.
Like a roller coaster, you know?
This airport with altitude is a force to be reckoned with for even the most hardened pilots.
You do it wrong, it's going to be hard landing.
With 4 crashes in the last 5 years, it's a perilous place to land.
The other side of the runway is just a wall, a mountain.
If you want to fly to Mount Everest, you must first survive Lukla Airport. It's the fastest way on or off the famous mountain.
The landing strip comes out of nowhere.
Oh my God, were you gonna really land there? I close my eyes.
And then you're banking steeply.
And you're just like holding your breath.
And then we were here.
I was just like, thank God I'm alive.
10 a.m.
Good morning,
12,000 feet in the air. Captain Rajesh Shrestha is flying a fresh plane load of climbers into Lukla's sky-high landing strip.
I'm flying for 40 years, and I hold the post of the chief pilot in Talcha Air.
One of today's passengers knows the challenges of Lukla better than anyone. Veteran Nepalese pilot, BJ Lama. He's flown into Lukla thousands of times.
I would say Lukla is probably one of the most exciting and exotic airfield that you can go and land there.
The first challenge Lukla poses to Captain Shrestha is its sheer height. Planes' wings generate less lift in the thin air of high altitude, so they have to fly faster to compensate.
You have to always play with the power till the touchdown.
Lukla is at 9,000 feet, sandwiched between some of the highest mountains on Earth. Staying airborne at this high altitude demands higher speeds. The plane must approach the runway at 86 miles an hour, faster than any pilot would want. And the next hurdle is traffic. At Lukla, helicopters and planes land and take off on the same runway. Throw in over 50 flights a day, and the risk factor keeps on climbing. Air traffic controller Kieran Kafle must be on top of his game. One mistake from him could end in tragedy. He radios up to Captain Shrestha. Shrestha is clear for landing. But once on the ground, he will have the sloping runway to deal with. At just 1,500 feet long, it forces you to slam on the brakes. Waiting at the end of the short runway is a solid stone wall. In 2010, this aircraft failed to stop in time. It hit the wall. Fortunately, nobody was seriously injured. Captain Rajesh Shrestha makes his final approach to Lukla, the world's most mountainous airport.
Approach is very, very critical here. As soon as we clear that hill, they start extending their landing gears, which you can hear just now.
Captain Shrestha makes contact with air traffic control.
Lukla morning.
Traveling at 126 feet per second, he's coming in fast, but at high altitude, he has to.
This is a straight nose-in dive. It's like a roller coaster.
Touchdown. But now he has to bring the plane to a halt. And the short runway is only 460 meters long.
There he goes. Very short final. Applied full reverse for the aircraft to stop.
He's made it. Another 15 climbers have successfully made the flight to Everest. But as Captain Shrestha pulls up to the terminal, he knows that next time, Lukla might fight back. At number 1, it's the world's most intense airport, Barra, Afghanistan. This is the way in and out of the war in Afghanistan. Bagram Air Base.
Every other airport a pilot operates into, people are trying to help. In Bagram, people are trying to do you harm now.
Bagram was built in the 1950s and in the decades since has been a strategic base for the Soviet Red Army, the Taliban, and since December 2001, coalition forces. Today, the airport is under the constant threat of attack. Operations at Bagram Airfield are overseen by the American military. It is their largest base in Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Hoffman is in charge of keeping missions running in this difficult environment.
We are under the threat of attack. We're doing combat operations 24/7.
Bagram has been attacked hundreds of times in the last decade. In May 2010, an infrared camera captured one moment the base was assaulted. A local insurgent threw a grenade at coalition troops. a firefight ensued. And the attack failed.
We are in a combat zone. We're always under the threat of an attack. I think Bagram has got to be one of the most extreme airfields in the world.
Bagram is also one of the busiest active taxiways in the world. It serves both military and civilian aircraft. To manage such a massive workload, the airbase runs all day and all night.
We're in the middle of a combat zone, and yet we push out over almost 1,000 aircraft every day, takeoff and landing. It's a challenge, but every single one of us here work off challenges, and we thrive off challenges.
As the war in Afghanistan draws to a close, the withdrawal of US troops will flow through Bagram. But for now, 300,000 passengers and 200,000 tons of cargo pass through it every year. The threats remain, but the planes have to keep flying at this airport. Bagram, the world's most extreme.